I never thought I'd see my own coffin before I died, but there it was. Right in the middle of my living room, wrapped in shiny gold paper and topped with a ridiculous red bow. The laughter came first. My grandkids, all 3 of them, giggling behind their phones as I stared at that long, polished box. Then came the words that broke something inside me. "Come on, Grandma Jo, you always talk about being ready for anything," said Max, my oldest. "Now you're ready for the big sleep." They laughed harder, and I just stood there, 78 years old, holding the cake knife I'd been about to use for my own birthday. I don't know what hurt more, the joke itself or the fact that none of the adults stopped it. My son, Mark, just rolled his eyes. "Oh, Mom, they're just being silly. Teenagers, you know." But I knew better. It wasn't just silliness. It was cruelty wrapped in humor, and cruelty doesn't grow in a vacuum. It's taught. "Take a picture, Grandma," said little Ella, 12 and mean in the way only children can be when they learn mockery from watching their parents. "Pretend you're sleeping inside." They burst out laughing again. I felt my heart twist, not from anger yet, but from something deeper. Humiliation. I could see my reflection on the coffin's glossy lid, pale, trembling, ridiculous. A woman who had raised this family, fed them, paid for their schools, watched over them when their own parents were too busy chasing promotions and vacations. And this was what they thought of me now. A burden, a joke, something almost dead already. I didn't say a word. I just set down the cake knife, turned off the music, and walked upstairs. "Grandma." "Come on, it's just a joke," Max shouted after me. "Then you enjoy it," I said without looking back. "Maybe one day you'll find yourself inside one, sooner than you think." I heard Mark mutter something like, "drama queen," and the room erupted in nervous laughter again. That was the night I realized something very important. When love turns into ridicule, silence becomes your greatest weapon. In my bedroom, the laughter downstairs faded into clinking glasses and the sound of party chatter returning. I sat on my bed, looking at the photo of my late husband, Henry, on the nightstand. "Oh, Henry," I whispered, "you'd have known what to do." He always did. He'd been kind but sharp, never let anyone cross a line, especially not family. After he passed, they stopped visiting for a while. Then they started showing up again, not for me, but for what they thought I might leave behind. The house, the land, the savings Henry and I had built for 50 years of honest work. That coffin wasn't just a joke. It was a message. You're old, you're done, and we're waiting. I didn't sleep that night. I made tea, sat by the window, and thought about every sacrifice that had brought me here. The double shifts at the diner when Mark was little, the nights Henry and I counted coins to pay the mortgage, the years when Christmas gifts were homemade pies instead of toys, and this was my thank you. At sunrise, the house was quiet. They were all still asleep, probably hungover from their own cruelty. I went downstairs and looked at that coffin again. It was expensive, real mahogany lined with white satin. Not some prank prop. They'd actually ordered a real one. I touched the wood. Cold. Beautiful. Final. And in that moment, I decided I wasn't going to die quietly. Not in spirit, and definitely not in this house. I called the funeral home, whose name was stamped discreetly on the brass plate near the hinge. "Good morning," I said calmly. "This is Mrs. Joanne Peterson. I believe one of your coffins was delivered to my address yesterday by mistake." "Oh, mistake?" The woman on the phone sounded confused. "We had a prepaid order for delivery, ma'am." "Prepaid?" "Yes, ordered by a Mr. Mark Peterson." I smiled then, a slow, cold smile I hadn't felt in years. "Could you send me a copy of that receipt?" I asked. "For my records?" "Of course, ma'am. Email or paper copy." "Both." By the time the family woke up, I was already in my garden, trimming my roses as if nothing had happened. When Mark came outside, rubbing his eyes, he looked uneasy. "Mom, look, the kids didn't mean—" "Don't," I said quietly. "I don't want your excuses. I just want you all out of my house by tonight." He blinked. "What?" "You heard me. You, the kids, all of you. I want my home back." "Mom, you can't." "I can," I said, turning toward him, "because the deed still has my name on it. Every inch of this land belongs to me, and if I can afford my own coffin, I can certainly afford to live alone." He stared at me like I'd gone mad. Maybe I had, just a little. But there was clarity in that madness, the kind that comes from humiliation turning into purpose. They left that afternoon slamming doors and throwing words behind them, ungrateful, senile, overreacting. But as the car pulled out of the driveway, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: peace. That night, I poured myself a small glass of Henry's favorite whiskey and toasted the silence. "Happy birthday, Joe," I whispered. "You're not dead yet." But as I sat there, the coffin still in my living room, I realized it wasn't over. Not yet. Because cruelty doesn't stop when you send people away. It hides, waits, and finds new ways to hurt. And I was going to be ready for it this time, because Grandma Jo wasn't done living or fighting. It's funny how the quiet after cruelty feels heavier than the noise itself. For 2 days, my house was still. No laughter, no footsteps, no slamming doors, just the ticking of Henry's old wall clock and the creak of my rocking chair. I thought the silence would bring peace, but it only made the memory louder. The laughter, the coffin, the disbelief on Mark's face when I told him to leave, every detail replayed like a cruel little movie I couldn't turn off. I didn't cry, not once. I think I'd already run out of tears years ago when Henry died. What I felt now wasn't grief, it was resolve. The kind of resolve that comes when a woman realizes she's the only one left to defend her own dignity. That morning, I opened my planner, the one where I kept recipes, grocery lists, and old phone numbers written in fading ink. And under the section labeled Things to Do, I wrote 4 words in capital letters: Plan, your funeral, yourself. If they wanted me buried so badly, I was going to make sure they'd regret ever saying the word coffin again. I started with the will. The old one was written 10 years ago, back when I still believed family loyalty meant something. It left everything to Mark and the grandkids equally: the house, the savings, even Henry's antique collection. I sat at the kitchen table with my cup of tea and tore it neatly in half, then again, until it was nothing but paper dust in the trash. Next, I called my lawyer, Mr. Randall, a kind, meticulous man who'd handled Henry's estate. "Mrs. Peterson," he said, surprised to hear from me, "how are you holding up?" "Alive," I replied, "and planning to stay that way, but I need to make some changes." "To your will?" "To everything." By the end of the call, I'd arranged for a new will, one that excluded every single person who thought buying me a coffin was a joke. Instead, I created a scholarship fund, the Henry and Joanne Peterson Foundation, dedicated to kids from working families who wanted to study nursing, like I once dreamed of doing before life and bills got in the way. If I was going to leave anything behind, it would go to someone who deserved it, not someone who laughed at me. The next step was the house. Henry always said, "Property keeps a family honest." He was wrong. Sometimes it makes them greedy. I called my realtor, Janet, a sweet widow who used to sit next to me in church. "Joe," she said gently, "are you really sure about selling the place? You've lived there half your life." "I'm not selling it, Janet," I said. "I'm protecting it. I want it put into a trust, one that they can't touch. Not now, not ever." Janet understood immediately. "I'll bring the paperwork myself." By noon, I had the lawyer, the realtor, and my financial advisor lined up. By sunset, I'd done more in one day than my son had managed in years. And for the first time in a long while, I slept soundly. The next morning, the storm hit. Mark showed up at my door around 8 a.m. He didn't knock, just walked in like he owned the place. "Mom, we need to talk." "Do we?" I asked, pouring myself coffee. "You embarrassed me in front of the kids," he said. "They were joking. You didn't have to throw everyone out." "Joking?" I looked at him. You think buying your mother a coffin for her birthday is a joke? He sighed like I was a child. You're too sensitive lately. Since Dad died. Don't you dare bring your father into this, I snapped. He'd have slapped sense into you. Mom, for God's sake, calm down. You're making everything worse. Am I? I handed him a copy of the email from the funeral home, the one confirming that he had purchased a coffin with my name on it. He read it, his face drained of color. It was just, I didn't think they'd actually deliver it. But you ordered it, didn't you? He hesitated. It was supposed to be symbolic. Symbolic of what? I asked quietly. That I'm closer to death than life? That you're just waiting? He opened his mouth, then shut it. For once, he didn't have an answer. Get out, Mark, I said. Mom, you heard me. Get out. He left, but not before slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. I stood there, shaking. Not from fear this time, but from something sharper. Freedom. By afternoon, a moving truck pulled up outside. Janet had arranged for a storage company to take some of Henry's old tools and the big furniture pieces I didn't use anymore. The workers were polite, careful. When they asked about the coffin in the living room, I smiled sweetly and said, "Leave it right there, it's a gift. I'm saving it for later." That night, I poured another small drink and stood in front of it, candlelight reflecting off its dark surface. "You know, Henry," I whispered, "I think I might just enjoy watching them squirm." The next few weeks were almost peaceful. I planted new roses. I took long walks by the lake. I baked pies again. Not for anyone else, just for me. For the first time in years, I remembered what it felt like to live without waiting for someone else's approval. But peace never lasts long when people smell money. The letter arrived 2 weeks later. Thick paper, expensive print. A petition for guardianship, filed by my son, claiming I was mentally unfit to manage personal affairs. He'd actually gone to court to declare me incompetent. For a long time, I just sat there, reading it again and again, not crying, not angry, just stunned by how far my own child was willing to go for control. Then slowly, I smiled, because Mark had just made his last mistake. He thought I was too old, too soft, too sentimental to fight. But Grandma Jo was done being the family's joke. If they wanted a show, I was about to give them one they'd never forget. Complete with a coffin, candles, and a lesson in respect written in bold letters across their greedy little hearts. And it all would begin on the night of my funeral, the one I'd decided to hold while I was still very much alive. The day I sent out the invitations, I laughed for the first time in months. They were printed on thick ivory cardstock, just like a wedding announcement, except the occasion wasn't love, it was irony. In loving memory of Joanne Peterson, still breathing for now. You are cordially invited to attend a celebration of life, mine. This Saturday at 6 p.m. dress code, black. Bring your conscience, if you can find it. I mailed one to everyone who had ever treated me like I was disposable. My son, his wife, the grandkids, even Pastor Roberts, who'd told me family misunderstandings heal with prayer. I wanted them all in one room, the same room where they'd laughed over that coffin. And this time, the coffin would be center stage again, but for an entirely different purpose. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. Let us know in the comments your story. Thank you. Friday evening, I had the delivery men move it into the garden. They hesitated, unsure what to say as I directed them. Tilt it a little to the left, I told them. I want it to catch the sunset just right. They nodded like I was eccentric, which suited me fine. Let them think I was losing my mind. People lower their guard around old women they think are broken. By Saturday morning, the house looked like something between a memorial and a theater set. Candles everywhere, black drapes framing the windows, soft organ music playing from my old Bluetooth speaker. I even baked cookies, because nothing says family event like sugar and passive aggression. At 5:55 p.m., the first car arrived. Mark. His face looked tight, his jaw clenched, like a man arriving at a battlefield he didn't quite understand. "Mom," he said, stepping out. "What is this?" "My funeral, apparently," I said. "You should be happy. You've been waiting long enough." "Jesus, Mom, stop this nonsense." "Language," I said sweetly. "There are children present." The children, my grandchildren, had their heads down, eyes glued to their phones. I wondered if they'd already written captions like "Grandma Drama" or "Awesome Boomer Breakdown." When everyone was inside, I shut the door and turned down the lights. "Thank you all for coming," I began. "It means a lot to see my beloved family gathered here, especially since none of you came to check on me after you brought me that lovely gift." Ella, the youngest, whispered, "Is she serious?" I smiled. "Serious as a heart attack, dear. Which I haven't had yet, but I'm sure you'd all enjoy watching." Mark rubbed his temples. "Mom, please." No, let her talk," said his wife Karen. She clearly rehearsed this. She wasn't wrong. I'd spent a week rehearsing every line. "I've given this family everything I had," I said, my voice shaking but strong. "My money, my time, my heart. And what did I get in return? Laughter, mockery, a coffin for my birthday." No one spoke. Even the kids had lowered their phones. "I thought about dying," I continued. Not because I wanted to, but because, for the first time in my life, I realized that you all already see me as dead. I'm just background noise to your lives. But then I remembered something your grandfather used to say, Mark. I turned to my son. He said, "Respect isn't inherited, it's earned. And tonight, I'm here to remind you what happens when you lose it." I walked over to the coffin and placed my hand on it. "This," I said softly, "is not a symbol of death. It's a reminder." Mark frowned. "Of what?" "That even the dead can rise when pushed too far." And then, right on cue, the garden lights turned on. The projector, borrowed from the local community center, flickered to life against the back wall. Photos filled the space behind me. Me holding Mark as a baby, me working double shifts, me signing the deed to this house, the family vacations I'd paid for. Every sacrifice they'd forgotten was now 10 feet tall, shining in their faces. I turned back to them. "Do you know who paid for your education, Mark? Who bailed you out when your first business failed? Who took care of your children when you were too busy working overtime? I did. Henry did. We built everything you take for granted, and I have the receipts. Literally." Karen crossed her arms. "Okay, we get it. You're mad. You want attention." I raised a hand. "No, Karen. I want truth." The next slide appeared, the funeral home receipt, with Mark's signature, the one that proved he'd actually ordered the coffin. Gasps rippled through the room. "Mom, it was a joke." "No," I said. "It was cruelty, and now it's evidence." Mark's voice rose. "Evidence for what? You can't just—" "I can, and I did," I said, "because yesterday I met with my lawyer. Everything I own, this house, my savings, even Henry's tools, is now under the Henry and Joanne Peterson Foundation. You have no legal claim to a cent." Karen's face turned pale. "What?" I smiled, feeling the power shift in the room like a breeze through the curtains. "And one more thing, the scholarship fund. The first recipient will be a local student whose parents were evicted because of corporate greed. Sound familiar, Mark? You represent those companies, don't you?" He stared at me, speechless. For the first time, he looked small. "I thought this would be your inheritance," I said softly, patting the coffin. "But turns out it's mine, a resting place for everything I used to tolerate. Disrespect, manipulation, entitlement." I paused, then looked each of them in the eye. "As of tonight, I bury all of it." Ella started to cry. Maybe she finally understood, or maybe she was just scared. But Max, my oldest, looked at me differently. Not mocking, not cruel, but guilty. "Grandma," he said quietly, "we didn't mean to hurt you." "Yes, you did," I said gently. but you were taught to laugh at pain instead of learning from it. So now it's your turn to learn." I walked toward the door, opened it wide, and gestured outside. "My funeral's over. You can all leave now." They shuffled out one by one, whispering, avoiding my eyes. Mark lingered last. "You'll regret this, Mom," he muttered. "No," I said, closing the door behind him. "For the first time in my life, I won't." That night, I sat alone in my quiet house again. The candles had burned low and the stars outside shimmered like tiny eyes watching. I poured myself a glass of whiskey and stared at that coffin one last time. It no longer looked like a threat. It looked like closure. But even as I smiled, I knew this story wasn't finished. Families like mine don't let go of money or pride that easily, and I could already feel it, the calm before the next storm, because my son wasn't done fighting me, and neither, God help him, was I. The letter came on a Monday morning, always a Monday, like bad news has a favorite day of the week. I found it tucked neatly under my door, slipped through the mail slot like a dagger wearing a polite envelope. The return address read, Mitchell, Grant, and Lowell, LLP, my son's law firm. I didn't even have to open it to know what it was. Still, I sat down at the kitchen table, poured myself a cup of tea, and slit the envelope open carefully. My hands didn't shake this time. Inside were exactly the words I expected. Official, cold, printed in small black letters. Notice of petition for competency hearing. Joanne Peterson, age 78, to determine capacity to manage personal and financial affairs. I laughed out loud, a bitter, breathy laugh that startled my cat off the windowsill. So, this was his next move. Declare his own mother incompetent. Take back everything I'd built under the guise of concern. "Oh, Mark," I whispered, "you never learned who you were dealing with." By the time the courthouse clerk called 2 weeks later to confirm the hearing date, I already had a plan. And a lawyer who was far sharper than my son ever imagined. Her name was Alexis Chen, and she wasn't the kind of woman you could intimidate. 40, fierce, and direct. I'd met her years ago through Henry's old union. She'd once defended a group of retired workers who'd been cheated out of their pensions. She'd won, spectacularly. "Mrs. Peterson," she said, shaking my hand firmly when she came to the house. "I've read everything you sent. The will, the receipts, the trust documents, the birthday gift. I have to say, this is one of the strangest cases I've ever seen." I smiled. "You haven't met my family yet." She laughed softly. "Oh, I'm looking forward to that." For the next 2 weeks, Alexis coached me through every question the court might ask. We practiced my testimony over tea and pie. She warned me not to lose my temper, not to sound defensive. "Just tell the truth," she said. "Let them make fools of themselves." That part came easy. They'd been doing it for years. When the hearing day arrived, I wore my best blue suit. Not black. I'd buried enough things already. The courtroom was cold and impersonal. Gray carpet, dull lights, the faint smell of old paper. My son sat across the aisle with his lawyer, avoiding my gaze. Karen sat next to him, dressed in beige like she was attending a charity luncheon. The grandchildren weren't there, probably too busy editing their lives on Instagram. "Mrs. Peterson," the judge said, a gray-haired man with tired eyes, "your son alleges that you are unable to manage your personal affairs. He has submitted evidence suggesting erratic behavior, including what he calls a mock funeral. Is that correct?" I nodded calmly. "Yes, Your Honor, I threw myself a funeral. It was a performance." "A performance?" "Of self-respect," I said, "and it seems it worked. Everyone finally showed up." The courtroom chuckled quietly. Even the judge's mouth twitched. Mark's lawyer cleared his throat and began reading from his papers like a nervous intern. "Mrs. Peterson has made a series of impulsive financial decisions," he droned. "She sold family property, altered her will, and transferred substantial funds into a foundation without notifying her immediate heirs." I leaned forward slightly. "Heirs," I repeated. "Interesting word, considering I'm not dead yet." The judge glanced at me, then at Mark. "Mr. Peterson, Do you have evidence that your mother's actions were coerced or impaired by mental decline? Mark shifted uncomfortably. Your Honor, she's been acting irrationally. She invited us to her own funeral, for heaven's sake. Yes, I said softly, because you bought me a coffin for my birthday. The judge's pen froze midair. Excuse me? Alexis stood. We have documentation, Your Honor. A receipt from Henderson & Sons funeral supply, paid in full by Mr. Mark Peterson, for a mahogany casket delivered to my client's home on her 78th birthday. The clerk passed the document forward. The judge scanned it, eyebrows rising higher with every line. Mr. Peterson, is this accurate? Mark stammered. It was supposed to be a joke that cost over $4,000? Alexis asked sweetly. Quite an expensive sense of humor. The gallery erupted in whispers. The judge held up a hand for silence, but I could see the faintest trace of disgust in his expression. Mr. Peterson, he said finally, from where I stand, your mother appears capable, articulate, and perfectly aware of her circumstances. This petition seems unnecessary. Your Honor, Mark tried again, she's manipulated by outsiders. This lawyer, these advisors. Alexis crossed her arms. You mean professionals she hired because she no longer trusts you? The judge nodded thoughtfully. A prudent decision, I'd say. I sat quietly through the rest of the proceedings, letting Alexis do the heavy lifting. When it was my turn to speak again, I kept my voice soft. Your Honor, I'm old, but I'm not helpless. My mind's fine. What's broken is my son's sense of decency. The silence that followed was long and sharp. When the judge finally dismissed the petition, Mark didn't even look at me. He gathered his papers, muttered something to Karen, and stormed out. I watched him go, feeling no triumph, just a strange, hollow peace. The kind you get after a storm passes and you realize your house is still standing, but some part of you isn't the same anymore. Outside the courthouse, Alexis handed me a folder. It's official, she said. The trust is secure. They can't touch a penny. Good, I said, because I think they're going to try again. She raised an eyebrow. You sure you're ready for more of this? I looked up at the sky, gray clouds rolling in. I was born ready. They just forgot who I was. And I was right. 2 days later, Karen came alone, pulled into my driveway in her shiny white SUV, sunglasses big enough to hide the truth in her eyes. Can we talk? She said. I doubt it, I replied, but go ahead. She followed me into the kitchen, the same room where she'd once joked about modernizing the house after I was gone. Mark's upset, she began. He says you've turned the kids against him. I didn't have to, I said, pouring her coffee. They're smarter than you think. Her lips tightened. Look, Joe, maybe we've all said and done things we regret, but it's time to move forward. Family is family. Family, I repeated. You mean the kind that buys coffins for birthdays and sues their own mother? She exhaled sharply. You don't have to be cruel. I smiled faintly. Oh, sweetheart, you haven't seen cruel yet. That evening, I took out the box where I kept old letters, Henry's handwriting, faded photos, memories of a life built on love and sweat and honesty, and tucked among them, I placed the court order dismissing my son's case, my quiet little trophy. But the truth is, Victory felt lonely. The house echoed too much. Even justice couldn't fill the silence where laughter used to live. Then, just as I was drifting to sleep, the phone rang. A voice I hadn't heard in weeks, trembling, small. Grandma, it's Max. I sat up. Max, what's wrong? His voice cracked. Dad's really mad. He says he's going to take everything from you no matter what it costs. He's different, Grandma. I don't like it. My heart ached a little. Then come see me tomorrow, I said softly, before he does something he can't undo. Because I could feel it again. The storm wasn't over, and this time it might take more than a courtroom to survive it. Max arrived early the next morning before the sun had even cleared the trees. He stood at the edge of my porch, tall and awkward in that way 18-year-olds are when they've outgrown their confidence but not their shame. His hair was messy, his sweatshirt half-zipped, and for the first time since I could remember, his phone wasn't in his hand. "Grandma," he said quietly, "can I come in?" "Of course, sweetheart," I replied. "You don't have to ask permission to enter your grandmother's house. Not yet, anyway." He followed me into the kitchen. The same kitchen where his father had called me delusional, where I'd once taught Max how to make pancakes when he was barely tall enough to reach the counter. I could still remember his small hands covered in flour, his giggle when he dropped an egg. Now he just looked tired, older than he should have been. "He's lost it, Grandma," he said after a while. "Dad, he's not sleeping. He's been drinking, yelling all the time. Last night he said he'd rather burn this house down than let you keep it." I froze, teacup halfway to my lips. "He said that?" Max nodded. "He was on the phone with some guy. Said something about making a point, showing you who really has control." I set the cup down carefully. "And your mother. She's pretending it's stress. Keeps saying he just needs time. But Grandma..." His voice broke. "I don't think he's just angry. I think he's planning something." For a long time we sat in silence. Outside, the sky was turning the color of steel. A storm was coming, literally and otherwise. I reached across the table and took Max's hand. "Thank you for telling me," I said softly. "You did the right thing." He looked down. "I didn't come just to warn you. I came to say I'm sorry. For the coffin. For all of it. We thought it was funny. We didn't understand." I squeezed his hand gently. "You were a child doing what children are taught. The fault isn't yours." He blinked fast, swallowing emotion he wasn't ready to show. "You're not mad at me?" "I was," I admitted. "But anger doesn't fix what love breaks. I just need you to be brave now. Can you do that?" He nodded. After he left, I called Alexis, my lawyer, my accidental ally. I told her what Max had said. She didn't hesitate. "I'll call the sheriff's office just in case." "Not yet," I said. "If Mark's truly desperate, I want to see what he'll do first. Sometimes you have to let people dig their own grave." "You're playing with fire, Joanne." "Fire," I said quietly, "is what purifies." That night, I couldn't sleep. Rain lashed the windows, thunder rolled low and long, and every sound made my heart race. I sat by the window with my flashlight and Henry's old baseball bat beside me, feeling half foolish and half fierce. It was almost midnight when headlights cut through the rain, a car pulling into my driveway. I knew that sound, the heavy growl of Mark's SUV. I didn't move. The engine shut off. The door slammed. For a moment, nothing. Then a sharp metallic rattle near the back porch. My breath caught. The lock. I stood, every nerve in my body screaming to hide, but something stronger, pride, maybe anger, held me in place. I flicked on the porch light. "Mark," I called through the door. "You don't need to break in. I'm awake." The rattling stopped. Then his voice, low, slurred. "You think you're smarter than me, old woman?" I opened the door but kept the screen latched. He stood there soaked, rain plastering his hair to his forehead. His eyes were glassy, wild. "You ruined me," he said. "You humiliated me in court, in front of everyone." "You did that yourself," I said evenly. "You stole what's mine. Nothing was ever yours." He slammed his fist against the frame. The sound cracked through the night like a gunshot. "I should have never..." He stopped himself, trembling. "You think you're so righteous hiding behind lawyers and papers? You'll regret this." "Mark," I said quietly, "you've already given me more regret than any mother deserves." He laughed, a harsh, broken laugh. "You think you can control everything. Fine, you win. Enjoy your empty house." Then he turned, stumbled back to his car, and roared off into the storm. I stood there, heart pounding, rain misting my face, and then I saw it, the faint flicker of orange near the edge of the yard. Smoke. Oh, God, I whispered. By the time I grabbed the fire extinguisher and ran outside, the trash bin by the fence was in flames, small but enough to send black smoke curling up toward the sky. The wind whipped the fire sideways, toward the rose bushes, the dry wood pile, the house. But I wasn't 78 in that moment. I was a young woman again, strong, furious, alive. I sprayed until the extinguisher hissed empty, coughed through the smoke, and stamped out the rest with my boots. By the time the sheriff's deputy arrived, called by a passing driver who'd seen the smoke, I was sitting on the porch steps, wet, soot-streaked, and shaking. "Mrs. Peterson," he said gently, "you all right?" "I've been better," I said, "but I've also been worse." He crouched beside me. "You have any idea who did this?" I looked at the blackened trash bin, the faint smell of gasoline, the tire marks in the mud. Then I looked him straight in the eye. "Yes, my son, and I want to press charges." Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. Let us know in the comments your story. Thank you. The fire didn't spread far, but word did. In a small town, news travels faster than smoke. By morning, everyone knew. The Peterson boy tried to burn his mama's house down. Karen called, sobbing. "Joe, please don't press charges. He wasn't thinking straight." "No," I said. "He was thinking very clearly. He just didn't expect me to survive it." 2 days later, the sheriff's office confirmed what I already knew. The gasoline residue matched the brand Mark kept in his garage. There were camera feeds from the neighbor's security system. It was undeniable. They took him in on Thursday, and I sat on my porch that evening, watching the sun set through the haze of burnt rose petals. I thought about the boy he used to be, the one who'd pick wildflowers for me on Mother's Day, who used to whisper, "Love you, Mom," before bed. I thought about how that boy had vanished somewhere along the road to manhood, buried under ambition and resentment. And I cried then, not for what I lost, but for what he'd thrown away. As the sky turned purple, I whispered to the wind, "You almost made me believe I was dead, Mark, but look at me. I'm still here." The next morning, Max returned. He sat beside me quietly for a while, then said, "They're saying Dad's going to lose his job." I nodded. "Actions have consequences." He hesitated, then asked softly, "Are you going to forgive him?" I looked out at the roses, half burned, half blooming again. "Maybe one day," I said, "but not before he learns what real loss feels like." He nodded slowly, tears glimmering in his eyes. "You're stronger than anyone I know, Grandma." I smiled faintly. "Strength isn't something you're born with, Max. It's something people beat into you, sometimes with laughter, sometimes with fire." And as I watched the morning light spill across the yard, I realized something. The coffin still sat in the garden, untouched, rain-slick and silent. It no longer frightened me. It was a reminder of everything I'd survived. But the story wasn't over yet, because even behind bars, a wounded son can still find ways to wound. And I could feel it. One last reckoning waiting just beyond the horizon. It's strange how quiet a house can feel after justice has been served. Too quiet, even. The kind of quiet that doesn't comfort. It watches. I'd won, yes. My son was facing charges for arson, my finances were safe, and my name had been cleared. But winning doesn't always feel like victory. Sometimes it just feels like the end of a long war that leaves too many ghosts behind. It had been 3 weeks since the fire. The roses, half-scorched, had started to grow again, defiantly. I tended them every morning, humming under my breath. Sometimes Max would come by after school to help. Other times, he'd just sit near me, silent, like being in my garden helped him breathe. One evening, as the sun sank low and turned the sky the color of honey, I heard footsteps on the gravel path. I looked up, expecting Max. But it wasn't him. It was Karen. Her face was drawn, pale, her hands clutching a folded paper. "Joe," she said softly, "please don't shut the door on me." I didn't. I just stepped aside. "Come in. but I can't promise you'll like what you hear." She followed me into the kitchen, the same kitchen where everything had once begun. The air still smelled faintly of smoke no matter how many candles I burned. She sat, twisting the paper in her hands. "Mark's hearing is tomorrow," she said quietly. "He asked to see you." I stirred my tea, pretending not to care. "What for? To apologize or to twist the knife?" "He says he's sorry," she whispered. "He's not drinking anymore. The kids visit him. He wants you there. He wants to look you in the eye." I didn't answer right away. My heart wanted to slam the door on him forever. But my heart had always been a fool when it came to forgiveness. "Tell him," I said slowly, "that I'll think about it." That night, I couldn't sleep. Henry's photo sat on my nightstand, smiling like he always did. Calm, patient, kind. "What would you do?" I asked the empty air. "Would you forgive him? Would you go?" The silence didn't answer, but something inside me did. A soft, tired voice that said, "Go. Not for him, for you." So I did. The next morning, the courthouse smelled of dust and disinfectant. When I walked in, heads turned. Everyone knew who I was by now. The mother whose son tried to burn her house down. The one who survived. Mark sat at the defendant's table in a gray suit that hung a little loose on him. He looked smaller, older, broken in the way pride breaks when the world stops caring about your excuses. When he turned and saw me, his eyes widened. For a second, I saw something I hadn't seen in years. My boy. The one who used to sneak cookies before dinner. The one who cried when his father died. The one I'd lost somewhere along the road of adulthood. After the hearing, where his lawyer negotiated a plea deal, probation, mandatory counseling, community service. He asked to speak to me privately. The judge allowed it. We met in a small waiting room outside the courtroom, 2 chairs facing each other like dueling pistols. He stared at his hands. "Mom, I don't know what to say." "Try starting with sorry," I said. "I am sorry," he whispered, "for the coffin, for the fire, for everything." I looked at him for a long moment. "You hurt me, Mark. You turned my love into a target. You made me afraid to sleep in my own home." Tears welled in his eyes. "I know. I don't even know why I did it anymore. Anger, money, pride, maybe all of it. I just kept blaming you for everything I didn't have. You worked your whole life and I wanted the shortcut." He looked up, desperate. "Can you ever forgive me?" Forgiveness. Such a small word for such a heavy act. I leaned back, feeling the ache in my bones. "Mark, forgiveness isn't a door you knock on and walk through. It's a field you have to cross barefoot, bleeding all the way." He blinked. "Does that mean no?" "It means I don't hate you anymore," I said, "but you'll have to walk that field alone." He nodded, silent tears streaking his cheeks. Before I left, I reached into my purse and pulled out something wrapped in brown paper. The folded funeral receipt from his birthday prank. I placed it on the table between us. "Keep it," I said. "So you remember what dying inside someone's heart feels like." Then I turned and walked away. The air outside smelled like rain again. Maybe storms really do follow me, I thought. Or maybe life just has a way of cleansing things that need it most. Max met me on the courthouse steps, eyes wide with hope. "Did you forgive him?" I smiled faintly. "I forgave myself first. That's what matters." He slipped his hand into mine as we walked toward the car. "Dad's not all bad, Grandma." "No," I said softly. "He's not. But sometimes good people rot when they stop watering their conscience." We drove home in silence. When we reached the house, the sky was glowing gold. My roses were blooming again, defiantly, beautifully. I stopped by the old coffin still sitting under the maple tree. It looked harmless now, almost peaceful. A symbol of everything I'd buried: fear, shame, the illusion that I needed anyone's approval to be alive. I opened the lid one last time. Inside, instead of satin, I'd filled it with papers. The court documents, the burned photo frames, the torn will, even the charred bits of old letters, the past, all of it lying neatly inside. Then, with Max's help, I closed it. "What are you going to do with it, Grandma?" he asked. "Bury it," I said. "Properly this time." We dug a small pit behind the roses and lowered it in. When it was done, I pressed my hand to the earth. "Rest easy," I whispered. "You've done enough harm for one lifetime." Max hugged me from behind. "You're amazing, Grandma." "No, love," I said softly. "I'm just done being afraid." The wind picked up, carrying the scent of rain and roses. For the first time in a long while, I felt light. Not because the pain was gone, but because I'd finally learned to carry it without letting it crush me. People say old age is a kind of slow dying. Maybe they're wrong. Maybe it's when you finally stop pretending to live for everyone else. I turned to Max and smiled. "Come on, sweetheart, let's bake a cake." "For what?" he asked. "For my birthday," I said. "The one they tried to bury." And as we walked back toward the house, our house, I felt the ground settle behind us, the wind calm, and for the first time in years, the silence felt like peace, not punishment, because I'd finally written the ending myself. And Grandma Jo, the woman they tried to bury, was very much alive. The end. If you like the story, please subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and write in the comments if something like this has ever happened in your life. I'd love to hear your stories. Thank you for watching.